one another, who would believe what we would profess? We say we love God, we are a Christian church. But if we ourselves don't love one another, what kind of message does that bring? No, even if we have to admit, even if we're Christians, we have differences. Sometimes we hurt other people, or we get hurt from other people among this room. Okay, but if we love God, we can look past the hurt and all the pains. We can pray for that person. We can love that person in spite of. So, believe me when I say that when people have wronged you or have hurt you, the proper response is for you to pray for that person and bless that person. You know why? The bigger, greater miracle in that is that the hate and the anger turns into love and compassion. And then you will be able to bless the other person and and other people as well, no? Both Christians and non-Christians. So what I'm saying is that loving others should actually start in the church. Loving others should actually start among us, each and every one of us in this room. When we do not have a right relationship with God, we cannot have right relationship with others. Because our relationship with others reflects our relationship with God. We love God when we love other people. Number 3, how do you love God? You also love God when you give. This is elementary. You cannot love without giving, right? So you cannot say you love God if you do not give to Him. So you give through tithes and offerings. Malachi 3:10, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty. And see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. So tithes is the first tenth of our income that we receive. First, the 10% of our salary. Well, not only salary, but also like we have dividends or interest income, or businesses, or anything that we receive is the 10% of that's our tithe. And offerings is above and beyond the 10%. The purpose of tithes and offerings is to support the ministry in our setting, to support the church. Okay. In other places, most of the ministers of the word are full-time pastors, full-time ministers. They do not have to work to support their families, but it's the church who supports them, because it is where they get their spiritual feeding. But sometimes we are so content of giving our tithes. Yes, that is what is required of us. But when you love someone, you don't really think of it that way, right? You don't limit your giving. That's right. Because you love, then you give cheerfully and generously. I want to tell you about church in South Korea. My pastor went there one time, and he was telling us about this one member of a church in South Korea. You know, South Korea is a very progressive nation, because it's actually, most of the people there are Christians. And there's a member of a church before he buys something for himself, he would look into the need of his pastor. So if I want a new phone, I'm not saying this, he didn't tell me to say this, but I just remember it. And he will be thinking, I want a new iPhone C, okay. Does my pastor have iPhone C? Okay, I better give him something. I better give him this before I get one for myself. That's how he loves his pastor. That's how he loves God. And it is true that he bought a brand new car, and he gave it to his pastor. And then, this is a true story, okay. And then he got the old car of the pastor. So whatever need whatever need he has, or whatever he wants, he looks at the need of the pastor and needs of the church first, because that's what's important to him. And the Lord has blessed him greatly. He has a small noodle house, and he's not really popular. And there are noodle houses along that street, along that way. But one day, I don't know if it's holiday or something, all the noodle houses are closed, and he was the only one open. So people have no choice but to go into their restaurant. And then people started to like it, and then now those noodle houses beside him are now closed, and he has opened around more than 10 establishments around South Korea, and his noodle house is so popular that people will always go there. So God has greatly blessed him, because he prioritized, he gave God first. Amen. And I also want to talk about I also remember in our church in the Philippines, we have a what you call Happy Birthday Jesus. It's a special offering since Christmas is a celebration of the birth of Christ, right? Sometimes at Christmas, we get caught up in giving gifts to everyone that we forget to give to the person who's been born that day. And I remember, tomorrow will be Dana's birthday. It will be absurd if every one of us will give each other presents, right? But nobody will give a gift to Dana. But it is Dana's birthday, right? So that's the whole point of Happy Birthday, Jesus. And no, the church in the Philippines also blessed because I haven't heard of a ministry in the Philippines who supports ministries not only in the Philippines but in other countries as well. So usually it's the other way around, right? Foreign church, foreign ministry supporting a Philippine church. But the people there have learned to give generously to God, and the Lord has blessed them. That's why the church keeps growing. And that is my prayer for this church. I have a vision for this church that God will greatly bless us, each and every one of us, that we will also learn to love God through giving, and that maybe one day our pastors, the ministers here, don't have to work to support their family, but we will be supporting them so that they can devote much time to do their work as ministers of God, for them to minister to other people as well, and for us to be able to reach out to other people, for us to grow in numbers. So remember, Matthew 6:21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So where we spend our resources, our money, there our heart will be. So don't think that it will be put to waste. We don't lay up treasures here on earth, but we lay up treasures in heaven. Because souls are more important than any other material thing in this world. How do we give? You give also by giving to others. Matthew 35:34-40. Then the king will say to those on his right, come you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So we also give to God when we give to other people, both Christians and non-Christians. When we open our houses to people in need, when we not only pray for them, but if we can provide any help to them. So that is giving to other people. That is loving God. You also give when you give your time. A friend once told me that where you spend your time, that's where your life is. So that's what's important to you. I'm not saying that we spend all our time at church every day, because that's not necessarily mean that you spend your time at church that you love God. Doesn't necessarily mean that you attend all the services. It's also the other way around. Doesn't mean that you miss a service, you don't love God anymore. Remember that God looks at our hearts. He looks at the motives of our hearts. We can very well go to every church service, but our heart's not there. Okay. Well, I would like to commend those who uses their time and their resources to pick people up from their homes and then drop them off after church. That's a way of showing our love to God, because we go the extra mile. We give our time and resources because we love God, and we want other people to know God also. Okay. You give when you use your talents. God gave each one of us talents where we can use. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 28. And in the church, God has appointed first of all apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then workers of miracles. Also those having gifts of healing, those able to help others, those with gifts of administration, and those speaking in different kinds of tongues. So using our talents is also one way of showing our love for God by using it for His work. So the verse that we read is like all-encompassing. It's like actually general, but we will go to specifics. So some are good in music, then use it. In the music ministry, or use it as a way to tell others about Christ. That's why we have Christian bands out there. That's their way of using their talent for Christ. Some are good in sports. Use it as an entry point to tell others about God. No, sports is like general language, right? It can break barriers. So use it to reaching out to our friends, to our neighbors, to our co-workers. Some are good in writing. You could use it and post it in social media, right? Some are good in teaching. Some are good in speaking. Some are even good in cooking. So you could use that to feed us. Anyway, what I'm saying is that there's always something that we are good at. So let's use that because we love God. Let's not put it to waste, okay? And try to overcome your shyness. Okay. Number 4, this is important. You love God when you obey.
Amen.
John 14:15. If you love me, you will obey my commandments. Verse 21. Those who accept my commandments and obey them are the ones who love me. Verse 23. Those who love me will obey my teaching. Verse 24. Those who do not love me do not obey my teaching. One of the examples of obedience is Abraham. In Genesis 22, we can look at the life of Abraham. Abraham was 100 years old when he had Isaac, his son. And then God told him to bring up Isaac to the mountain and offer him as a sacrifice. But in spite of that, Abraham obeyed. And we can see that it was only a test. In Genesis 22:11 to 12, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. He answered, yes, here I am. Don't hurt the boy or do anything to him, he said. Now I know that you honor and obey God, because you have not kept back your only son from him. So, for those who are parents, if you put in yourself in Abraham's position, will you be able to do it? Will you give a child to God if He asks you to? For the youth, will you give up a boyfriend, a girlfriend, best friend, or anything if God tells you? So, if God tells you to do something, are you willing to do it? If God tells you, okay, get out of that job, but you know that that is the dream job and then that you want, and that God gave you that job, you know that for sure. But if sometime later God asks you to give up that job and do some other things, maybe get into another company or be a full-time minister or whatever. If God tells you to do something, are you willing to do it? If God tells you to give up your big house and just live in a small house, are you willing to do it? No, we don't know the plans what God has for us. No, He knows He has His purposes. We may not understand it sometimes, but if we really love God, our proper response is to obey. So I have a friend who I really respect, and now I really admire her all the more because God has asked her to give up a very, very precious relationship, and she obeyed. Yeah, she has to let go of all the distractions and focus on her relationship with God, and because that relationship do not draw her closer to God. So she let go, she just let God do the work. She obeyed. It was not easy, it was very difficult, but I know that she loves God more than that other person, so she obeyed. God has His purposes, and I can see that she's happy, that she has joy in her heart because there is joy in obedience. So if we look into all this, there is really no downside in truly loving God. When we it's a win-win situation when God is number one in our lives, when we give, when we love other people, when we obey. It's actually more for our benefit, right? Amen. The more that we love God, the more that we are changed. Because there's joy, there's peace, there's hope, even in the midst of all these troubles. And we say we love God, so the ultimate question before is, do you love God? I hope that we were able to assess ourselves in that area, because loving God is not a burden. Should not be an obligation, because He loved us first in spite of everything, right? So He sees our hearts, but He loves us just the same. His love for us is unconditional. He has been faithful